So I'm Mark Stobert. I'm lead chaplain at Adam Brooks Hospital, Cambridge University Hospitals, and that covers also Papworth Hospital. I have been a chaplain for 30 years, 25 of which have been full-time. And in that time, I've looked after acute unit and also mental health. I trained as a psychotherapist as well in that time as well, bring that to bear in the work I do. So yeah, that's me. I'm also chair of the UK Board for Healthcare Chaplaincy, which is the register of chaplains.
Terrific. So you are a professional when it comes to the Christian healing ministry in various different ways then. So you're literally getting paid by the NHS to do the job you're doing at the moment.
Yeah.
It's one of the features of one of the curious and attractive features of the NHS is that even when cash strapped, it continues to pay for hospital chaplains.
Yeah, very much.
So, one of the things that I've grown to admire and like about you, Mark, is your use of poetry and your use of words. And that's really what I wanted to talk about today. So you spend all your time talking to people who are distressed or ill or recovering or facing an uncertain future. So how is it that you've come to use poetry? When is that the right thing to do? When is it not the right thing to do? What's your experience?
I'll start with a quote. Hendrik Zimmer once said, "The greatest things can't be told. The next best are what we think about the great things, and the third best are what we say about the thoughts about the great things." I'm gonna, if I can just sort of, my own sort of reflection on that is, the greatest things can't be told. The next best are the exclamations of the great things, and the third best are the descriptions. And I think of poetry being in and around the exclamations, the symbolic. And don't get me wrong, prose can be poetic in that sense. So I start from that basis, and so I carry around poems as a quote. I can't remember who said it. I'll just find it. Nicholas Albury, whoever he is, says, "To know a poem by heart is to slow down to the heart's time." And I'm very lucky. I've got one of those sort of brains or something that seems to be able to capture poems, readings, write it in a way that sits in the heart. So I sometimes bring those to bear, particularly around moments where words just stop, and the words, how the words are shaped and formed, take over. So the poetic, the symbolic, and I bring those to bear in lots of moments for people.
So how do you respond to someone like me, Mark, then? So for me, poetry, you'll have to excuse this, poetry is a kind of added extra to life. It's a frilly, sophisticated thing that you might indulge in, when life is well and good, a bit like ballet or something like that. It's not hardcore, people like me would say.
Well, I think actually, no, poetry is the hardest of cores. If you read R.S. Thomas poetry, which is one of my inspirations for doing my own, what is it? Let's think about it. Threshold, which is a poem that says, "I woke from the mind's cave into the worst darkness outside. I heard the still small voice. It was that of the bacteria demolishing my cosmos." You don't get much hardcore than that. And then he goes on to say, "What to do on the edges of such an abyss, but like Michelangelo's Adam, reach out my hand into unknown space, hoping for the reciprocating touch." I mean, this is about existential qualities of life. That doesn't get much more hardcore than that, because that's fundamental, Or which is the one? Frequencies, is it? It says, "The earth bore and they reaped. God," they said, "looking in your direction. The wind changed, and over the drowned body, it was you they spat at. Younger I pronounced you, older I still do, but seldom now, letting your name go over the vast horizons, waiting for the echo of its arrival." Now that's
those words make an impact even on me, you see. So And that leads me to ask, I mean, is everyone sensitive to words and to poetry? Do you expect everyone you meet to get it?
Well, they say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That couldn't be further from the truth. Words can hurt. Words have power. I know you're going to. I sent you a poem called "The Words Are Not." But actually, I'm going to read a poem which is a precursor to that. And I wrote it when I was I was at the inauguration of one of the synods some years ago in Westminster Cathedral. I just had a sudden spurt of poetry. I'm not a trained poet, but anyway, this is called "Listening to the Holy Spirit." Our sickness is our fascination with words, to control them and make them do what we want, to create walls with them. What if we offer words as gifts, like stars that make their own constellations that will guide us to an incarnation? We think that we can hide behind the pretense that words can conceal us, or fire words to wound or distract, but the not words will give us away.
Not words. Yeah, so this is, I think this is a bit of a paradox. You're a very wordy person. You've got these words in your head. And I can see how they're helpful. Are there times when it's helpful not to say anything?
Oh yeah, a lot of the time. And I'm with patients a lot of the time, and particularly if I just spend a lot of time in ICU, where you've got patients who are often on ventilation, and with families where there's not enough words. But I use what's called deep silence to really get into the stillness of the silence without words, and into the holding, and I think then you're using body, whole sense of self to commune, to hold, to gauge what's happening for somebody. I must have a conversation with you about that as a neurologist, how that works.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a whole dimension of work that we're really. I'm very familiar with Daniel Siegel, who's a neuro psychiatrist, and his book on Aware, which is about the science of becoming and being, where he weaves quantum theory and meditation practice together. Is absolutely fascinating, and the stillness, and where he talks about that when you become still and in the pure awareness and of meditation or prayer, and this is the mystics, you descend to the level of ultimate possibilities, and that's a fascinating opening to thinking about what that means when we're with somebody, when we're praying, when we're all of that. So then words are just inadequate.
So I think you present us with an interesting paradox, as I say, someone who's very wordy, who chooses to be silent. And that's all by way of introduction, because I do want us to read one of your poems. So I'm going to see if I can get this to work.
I've got it in front of me.
Let me share it on the screen so that our listeners can do it. So we're nearly there. So this is one of your poems. It's called "Words Are Not Words," and I've read it several times now. I think I can get bits of it, but maybe deciphering is not the right approach. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Mark, would you read this for us, and then let's talk about it.
Yeah. Words, not words. Not words dance with words. The two are inseparable. Not words are ever present in silence when words are stilled. Only in pure, brilliant stillness do not words let go their pursuit of healing like atoms of absolute zero. Some not words yearn to be born as when words are given to the inexpressible. There are many more not words than words. Even when screaming in pain or shouting loudly, words not words can only be heard by compassion. Disciplined empathy is needed to understand not words, and even then that may lead to other not words until they can crystallize and find their form.
So what are not words? Is that the discipline to not say anything, to be silent, or is there more to it than that? Or less to it?
I don't know. I'm thinking, how do I decipher this? Some of it is experiential.
Yeah.
In that, I mean, as I've always been in practice as a chaplain, and then subsequently as a trained psychotherapist, using elements of what we would call transference and countertransference, where when you're with somebody, you will feel things. And where I put it is that people, those you're with, and it doesn't have to be a formal situation, but there'll be a conversation, a words conversation, but there'll also be another hidden conversation, which represents about 70% of all communication, which is not words. And that includes, it's the unconscious dimension, the micro things. So the not words are there. And it's like they will hang a bag, an emotional bag, on one of our emotional hooks. And I know what the hook is because it rings a bell within us. And sometimes that's with words, sometimes it's imagination, sometimes it's feeling or bodily reaction. And that's the kind of element of not words that I'm talking about when I'm working. And people will, as I say, will try and hide behind the words, but the not words give them away, always. And it's looking for the traces of that, but doing it with compassion, because you're not judging the not words. You're
not trying to trick people or catch them.
Some would do, but my aim is, if I'm alive to that, that's why I say you really get hold of them when you're bringing compassion to bear, to listen. You might want to offer them back in word form, translate them from not words to words, and sometimes that's poetic.
Let me just pick up this phrase: not words let go their pursuit of healing. Only in pure brilliant stillness do not words let go their pursuit of healing. What should I understand by that?
I took the term pure brilliant stillness from a book called Pure Brilliant Stillness, and a man's talking about his experience of an enlightened moment where he found that pure brilliant stillness, where there are no words. That it's exclamation even then is sort of second best to the greatest things, but they stop. There's no need. That is healing. So they don't have to pursue it. That's why I said it's like atoms at absolute zero. They stop, and that there's a kind of one that would be a completely and total experience of, I guess, at one moment.
Yeah. So that rings a bell for me. There are people with epilepsy a small proportion of people with epilepsy who experience ecstasy during their seizures, and these have got various kind of special names. But one of the interesting things about talking to such people is that they become wordless when they try to describe the numinous or the ineffable, or whatever word we try and lasso it with. So for me, it's one of the hallmarks of these particular seizures is that people just dry up and find themselves unable to express their experience. And I think that's quite a authentic character of spiritual experiences.
That
sort of drained of words.
And I wonder if one of the ways in which there would be, and they say that if you like, that enlightened experience is not the issue. It's actually living with it. And that's why in many of the traditions, mystical traditions, including Christian mystical traditions, the monks or whoever don't don't do the spiritual discipline to get enlightenment or whatever that might be, but actually to be in a position where that might happen, but also if it did happen, they'd be in a position which they would be able to apprehend it, and it wouldn't blow them away. And that's where that's there's a story about a master was in the meditation hall, and he was rubbing two bricks together, and a monk comes in. What are you doing, master? He says, I'm making a mirror. And the master said, the monk says, you can't make a mirror by rubbing two bricks together. No, can you reach enlightenment by meditation? And it's just sort of saying, it puts you in the position where it might be, it comes, and when, if it does, you can handle it.
And for you, how specific is the Christian version of the healing ministry? I mean, you're very open to other traditions, to other stories. Do you think that there's something very distinct and special about the Christian story, or is it just one of many?
I'm going to be controversial. I think it's one of many, but in the day and age, it's I'm a fan of a guy called Joseph Campbell, who was a mythologian, and he would identify. But then it's one of many, but it's because but it is quite distinctive, we almost always look in all our traditions for the where they become temporal inflections of eternal truth. So there's an eternal truth which is again wordless, but we know it, and it's so that it's a mythological reading would say that it's captured in that. Well, that's why we go back to it. That's why we celebrate Christmas every year, because it's overwhelmingly this experience of light coming into the world, and we don't want to trivialize that or make it small. And equally, the metaphors of resurrection, of sacrificial love, and what Jesus is asking us to become in all of that, because of history makes it stand out enormously. I would say I'm a interfaith multilingualist, but my mother tongue is Christianity.
Right. Okay.
My dialect is Methodism.
Well, let me ask you. I didn't prepare any of these questions for you. But what do you think of Jesus's words? So when you read the Gospels, do you think Jesus is a poet, his storyteller? Do you like his words, in as much as they're translated?
Yeah, I think, absolutely. I mean, there's some that would jar, and I think this is where how we understand what he was saying. The parables particularly are those stories. Some of them are ones that make us make a decision, and draws us into a decision-making process. The parable of the sheep and goats, for instance. Where we're asked to make a decision in the story, in the listening to the story, we're making a decision as to which group we kind of want to be in, or should be in, or but then we're also making a decision as to which group we might be in. And if we're honest, we'll be in both. Sheep and
I mean, that's a particularly hard story, isn't it? I mean, that's not soft and fluffy in any way.
No, but actually it's making us then and then to make a decision about what is important in life. I often do that with children who want to be baptized. I tell them the story of the sheep and goats and ask them which is the right group, and they'll say, the sheep. And which group are you in? And then they'll, it's about that there was a minister who said to a child when they got to the confession, if if all the good people were red and all the bad people were green, what would you be? She said, I'd be stripy.
Yes.
So yeah.
You have a large library in your head of things to draw on, and whenever I talk to you, you're always drawing on this library. I guess, you know, I've never done that. I've never learnt poems. I've never, well, I guess I did at school, but I mean, this isn't a discipline I've done. I've never learnt liturgy other than the Lord's Prayer. Do you think this is be helpful for people like me to do, start to build up a mental library of words and liturgies and poems?
I don't know. I've never been a discipline. It's just something I happen to do, and I'm lucky like that. I mean, I had a colleague who used to hate me for being able to lead a service, you know, and have the liturgy in my head.
I can understand that. I can understand that. Irritation.
I'm just lucky in that sense. But I do think that sometimes, I mean, there's poems that I use a lot, but I have never somehow or other been able to memorize.
You don't sit down and say, I must learn this poem.
No. And then sometimes I mean, like R.S. Thomas, I get the quotes wrong, but it's the bits that stick, you know, because hopefully they're authentic. They're authentic because it's sort of, I live by them. They're myths to live by, I call them. So I live by the poetry. And
so just so one last bit of advice from you. So if it was me or someone else like me who wanted to explore Christian poetry or poetry that might be helpful, what names would you suggest we started with?
Ooh.
Like a beginner's.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm not a literary man. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, you're asking me about poetry, and I'm not a literary man. I just things I've gained. I can't help but go back to R.S. Thomas.
Yeah.
And his poetry. I mean, he was an amazing poet, a religious poet, and he's wrestling with God and not God and absence and darkness, and then love as well. It's just, you know, the love poems he wrote. He would be one. Contemporary would be Janet Morley, mainly because of her writing a liturgy. I've met Janet a few times, and her poem "And You Held Me" is again one of those I go back to again and again, and I offer to people. And in fact, when I was where I was before, the words of "And You Held Me" are written on the doors of the prayer centre, and I had this amazing encounter with the artist who did that, who's again just a wonderful artist. And Janet, I said, Janet, you want to come see the words? Yeah. So then I said to Malcolm, who did the work, Malcolm, do you want to come meet Janet? Yeah. So I had this three-way discussion about her poetry and a liturgy and how she conceives and the wrestlings, and then Malcolm's work with people when he's wrestling to get sense of things, and my work with in healing. Fascinating. But Janet Morley would be another one. I don't know. I think there others will have favourites. I don't do trite poetry. I collect poetry. I collect books with them in. Some of the ancients. I mean, there's some of the old saints. Their poetry is amazing. I love those one. I can't remember, it's by Rumi, where he says, "Me and God are like two giant fat people in a small boat. We keep bumping into each other, falling over and laughing."
Well, that is a fantastic place to end. Thank you. The vision of us two fat people in a little boat. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much.